Welcome to Birding with Lois. My name is Lois Richter. I am your host today, and I'm very glad that you've joined us. Today, I have a special treat. Scott Bourne, who's a fantastic photographer, has agreed to be interviewed by me. We did an audio interview, and we have created out of that a wonderful segment. So I give to you Scott Bourne. I am so pleased that you, Scott Bourne, are going to be on my show. I have so admired your work, and thank you.
Well, it's very kind of you. I'm happy to be here and do the best I can to help you.
Great. All right. Well, so the first thing I want to do is ask you how you made that wonderful cranes picture. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, Cranes in the Fire Mist is a picture that haunted me for more than a dozen years. I saw a picture similar to that at the British Wildlife Competition, and I realized and recognized it had been made at Bosque del Apache, New Mexico, which is a place I've been going to for, this will be my 39th year this year. This will also be my last year going, so I'm going to make the most of it. But I figured out kind of where it was, and I started scouting out how to make the picture. Now, the problem is, when you're a wildlife photographer, you're not in control of anything. You're in control of maybe where you stand, but that's about it. And if you're a bird photographer, then the real problem comes from having to deal with wind and sun angle, because as a bird photographer, those two things really control everything that we do. Birds take off, perch, land, and fly into the wind, just like airplanes. If you go to the airport, you can see where the windsock is going, and you'll see the airplanes take off into the wind. So if the wind is in your face, that means you're going to have pictures of bird butt because they're always going to be taking off away from you. So in order to make this picture, I had to have the wind going any direction but in my face. It could have been behind me, in which case the birds would have flown right over me, or it could be from left to right, which is what happened in this picture, and that was fine. I also knew that I wanted this orangish color. Now, the only way you get that is if you have a bald blue sky at sunrise. If you have clouds, then the clouds will cause you to have the purples and the reds and all the beautiful colors that we usually want. But if you just want that orange hue, there have to be no clouds. So I had to have that happening. There has to be water in that pond. Now, the way that Bosque del Apache works, it's a national wildlife refuge, and it's not there for the photographers, even though a lot of us go there. It's there for the birds. And they move the water around, so not every year is there water in that pond. That pond is unofficially called the Railroad Pond. And since I made that picture, they've stopped filling it because too many people tried to go and make the picture, and unfortunately they had to cross a railroad track that was dangerous, so they just stopped all that. Unfortunately, I started that. I didn't mean to, but I didn't know that the picture would become so popular. Anyway, and then, of course, you have to have the geese and the cranes there. So there are three types of birds there. Starting around November all the way through January is a migration of sandhill cranes that come down from the Colorado Rockies, and both lesser and greater, I think, but snow geese and Ross's geese are the prominent birds, the most we have. Snow geese, you see the most of those. Ross's geese, there's a few of those. About 1 out of 10 or 20 of the birds you see there will be a Ross's. And those are the three types of birds. But I can't send them an email and say, show up at the pond. So they have to be there. So for this picture to work, a whole lot of things had to happen. Now, the other thing that makes this picture work is the mist. Well, you only get mist if it's almost perfectly 32 degrees Fahrenheit. because the water temperature and the air temperature have to meet in such a way that the mist forms. So to make a very long story short, what happened was I saw this picture in my mind using a technique that Ansel Adams called pre-visualization, where I actually saw the photograph before I took it. And I went to this place because I figured this would be the best place and the best chance for conditions to get it. So what I needed were a pond with water in it, birds. I needed the wind to be going a certain direction. I needed a bulb blue sky. I needed to be there right at sunrise. And it had to be 32 degrees. Now, you may note that I'm not in control of any of those things. So what ended up happening was I would go year after year, and maybe the birds wouldn't be there, or maybe the sunrise wasn't right, or maybe it was too warm or too cold. And it took me 12 years of going to that same exact spot. And I went every year on Thanksgiving Day, because that tends to be a good day to travel. At least it used to be. The crowds weren't so bad. And because it was the day the birds like to really get there in mass. So I traveled every Thanksgiving Day for 12 years and stood at that same spot and waited for these conditions. And then lo and behold, I guess they say luck is where preparation and hard work meet. I got lucky. It was 32 degrees. There were no clouds in the sky. The wind was coming from the north. There were plenty of birds in the pond. Then the last thing I wanted was I wanted some birds flying into the scene. And I knew that I had the right conditions, and I just stood there and waited. And finally, out of the corner of my eye, I saw these birds flying into the scene. I let go with a burst from my remote shutter. Those birds landed. The rest of them flushed, took off. It was over in about 4 seconds. And if I didn't get it, I didn't get it. But I went back to the hotel and found out I had it. And I was pretty happy because I had spent a good portion of my life trying to make one stupid photograph. And then somebody asked me, well, why didn't you just Photoshop all that? And I went, oh, I forgot. I could have done that.
I'm a photographer. I don't do that. I take pictures.
Well, for me, I don't mind photoshopping. It's just that a lot of my work is published in field guides and in textbooks, and accordingly, I can't make stuff up. It has to be accurate.
Yeah.
It's more or less like journalism. If I'm doing just an art piece, well, I can paint the space shuttle landing there. It doesn't matter. It's fine. But for the kind of work that I typically do, it's not possible. So anyway, I got it, and I really didn't think much about it. I taught a workshop after that. I went home. I printed it. I decided, at the time, I think I only had 40,000 Twitter followers. I printed the story about it, and I made some prints, and I said, I'm going to offer these. I used to work through galleries. Most people don't know the gallery owner takes at least 50%. So I thought what I'll do is I'll just sell these for what I get, and that way they'll be more accessible. And I sold 100 prints in 8 days, and it was over. And I was very sad that I didn't make it a larger edition because I made $40,000 in 8 days. Not too bad for a bird photographer.
Not too bad. Not too bad at all.
And the resulting story, though, ended up getting circulated a lot. So I've been able to tell this story many times to many groups of people, and I'm proud to do it because it shows the bond that I have with birds. I'm in love with them, and I always have been since I was a little kid. I mean, when my dad really wasn't much of a gift-giving guy. The only thing he ever actually gave me was a bird book, and I think he did that to shut me up. And so I, as a little kid, I was just like, these things can fly. That was it. I was sold out. I want to be one of them. Yeah. And so I spent my life studying ornithology and then becoming a bird photographer.
Can I ask you some questions about your story?
Mm-hmm.
When you were standing there, were you literally standing there, or did you have a blind, or where were you taking the picture from?
Okay, so there is a railroad track that runs parallel to Highway 1 in San Antonio, New Mexico, which is where the entry to the refuge is. I crossed the railroad track, and there's just a little bluff that I was standing on. And the thing about Bosque del Apache is those birds are habituated to humans. So they'll come right up to you. I mean, they'll come sit in your car if you let them. They're not afraid of us. Now in Nebraska, where they have another big crane festival, the people there are convinced that the birds are afraid of us, and they make you stay in a blind 300 yards away, and it's not a good photo op. But in New Mexico, there's no such nonsense. You stand there, and I was probably, I want to say, 50, 60 feet from the pond. I wasn't disturbing the birds, and I was using a long lens. But yeah, I'm just standing there killing time before it killed me.
And since you had a digital camera and electrons are free, did you take a whole bunch of pictures before the burst that got you the goodie?
No, and here's why. This is the curse and the blessing of pre visualization. I was there for one photograph. You know, I went to bed every night thinking about this photograph, and I woke up every morning thinking about this photograph, and it literally haunted me. I mean, it was 13 years of my life. I just wanted to make this photo. Now, granted, I made other photos at Bosque while I was there, and I usually teach workshops, and while I'm teaching, I don't usually shoot a lot. I try to make myself available to the students. I already have 440,000 pictures from Bosque del Apache. I don't necessarily need one more. There's probably, if birds do it at Bosque del Apache, I have a picture of it, trust me. But I wanted this particular shot. So, no, I would just stand there. But what I would do is I would try to just meditate and contemplate how lucky I was to be standing there in this place, because there are billions of people on the planet that will never know that Bosque del Apache exists. They will never know what it feels like to be there on a cool, crisp morning when the birds are flying in and you hear the honk of the sandhill cranes, which, by the way, is the oldest sound on Earth.
How do you figure it's the oldest sound on Earth?
I can tell you how. I'm glad you asked. Sandhill cranes are direct descendants of flying dinosaurs. And the vocal cord, so to speak, the vocal structure of the sandhill crane is identical to that of the dinosaurs. So that's how we know it's the oldest sound on Earth. So when you hear that honk, that's very similar to what the dinosaurs would have made. Scientists have studied the dinosaurs and the flying dinosaurs and found this connection with working with ornithologists. So when I would hear that sound, I would think to myself, billions of years ago, some creatures might have heard that sound. And I just would try to get wrapped up in the moment and try to be present. One of the things that I think sets my photography apart is I'm very deliberate in everything that I do. I don't react. I don't wait for something to happen and press the shutter button. I plan, I strategize, I build a story in my mind, and that's another thing I do. It's crazy. I write music in my brain while I'm waiting for the birds, and typically I'll use that music in a slideshow later when I present the images. But yeah, I keep myself busy, and I love being out with the birds. And frankly, I've retired now from professional bird photography this year. I still sit out there with the birds, though. I just don't take a camera.
When you took that burst that got your wonderful shot, did that trigger the birds to leave? Because I know you said as soon as the ones who flew in landed, everybody took off. Was it the time of day, or was it a sound, or what was it that triggered that?
The birds couldn't hear what I was doing, so that I had no impact on it. It was the birds landing, and it was around dawn. And every day at Bosque del Apache, there's this thing called the fly out. And those of us who have seen it never forget it, and it's very difficult to describe. Now, unfortunately, because of climate change, the current flyouts aren't the scope and size of the ones we saw when I was visiting back in the 80s and 90s. But all the birds take off and lift off at once, and it's sort of on cue. Well, I shouldn't say all. The sandhill cranes wait. The snow geese and the Ross geese all leave at once. The sandhill cranes wait, and then they go maybe 20 minutes later. They like to do a little dance as they walk across the pond and take off in groups of two or three, whereas the entire flock of Rosses and snow geese will take off. And it was the sandhill cranes landing and it just being the right time that they took off, and they head to the North Fields. One of the jobs of the National Wildlife Refuge is to feed them. So they pay the farmers in nearby fields to grow corn and alfalfa, which is what these birds are there to do. They're there to eat as they're making their journey southward for their migration. So they stop in to rest and to eat. And unfortunately, climate change has really negatively impacted the area. Last year's drought was severe, and this year we're hoping it'll be a little better, but it doesn't look like it. The Rio Grande River is the reason that birds have been coming that way for millions of years. Most people don't know this, but there are bird highways. It's called the flyway. So the Pacific Flyway is the highway that the birds take to come on down, or the Central Highway, the flyway. There are multiple flyways, north-south corridors that birds use, and birds navigate based on the DNA imprinting that they have from their parents, and by using the stars, believe it or not. They actually use the stars to see where they're going. And they go to certain places because it's imprinted in their DNA. I mean, birds, you might have heard the phrase bird brain, which is a derogatory phrase for someone having not much of a brain. Birds don't really do, thinking like we do. They don't contemplate stuff. They just react based on their DNA, and they know they're supposed to be there, so they come.
Thank you so much for that story. And so the viewers and listeners know that that story is also available on Scott's website, scottbourne.com, and you can go there and you can read about what Scott just talked about. If you have another moment or two, one of the crew, when they found out that we were going to be doing this, was so excited. And he was like jumping up and down in his chair. And he said, how did he get that picture? He'd been looking at your website, and there's a picture there of an eagle going across the water, and the tip of the wing and the tip of the tail are touching the water. And it's a beautiful shot. All of your stuff's a beautiful shot. But he was trying to figure out, where in the world were you that you could get that angle and you could see that eagle? You got any remembrance of that?
Oh, absolutely. I know exactly what picture you're talking about. I spent 30 years going to Alaska in addition to going to Bosque del Apache. I did this for a living, so I basically started traveling every year on January 4th on a cycle that would take me around the country and sometimes around the world based on things like breeding plumage changes or migrations. So like January 4th, I would head down to La Jolla Cliffs, where in California, where the California brown pelicans would go into breeding plumage. Also, the Brandt's cormorants would go into breeding plumage, and I would shoot those photographs. Then I would go north and do, sanderlings. I had a system that basically took me all around the country, where Alaska was 2 different times during each year, and one of them being for eagles. In the Cook Inlet of Alaska is one of the largest congregations, and that's, by the way we discuss a group of eagles. It's called a congregation of eagles. One of the largest in the United States is in Alaska, and certainly in the Cook Inlet there are plenty. But here's the secret: in the winter, when nobody else wants to go, I would go. And I remember the first year I went up there, the people, when I got off the plane, all the only people on the plane were oil rig workers and stuff like that. And I was the only non-oil rig worker. And the taxi driver came up to me and said, "Sir, did you mean to get off the plane here?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "There's nothing open." I said, "Well, the hotel's open." He goes, "Well, you're right." He goes, "There's no restaurants open." I said, "There's a restaurant at the hotel." He goes, "Well, yeah, you're right about that too." And that's all I need. And I would rent boats and then go out into the Cook Inlet. And the birds are all congregated there for one reason.
Food.
it's food, but it's also because they're waiting on. Have you ever seen a Deadliest Catch? That show where
Mm.
it's a television show where people go out crabbing, and they show it's a documentary style television show, and the boats from that show and shows like that are all in the harbor there, and the birds start to congregate because they know those boats are full of chum,
Mm.
and they follow them out to the Bering Sea. But before they leave, they are all kind of waiting around. So the trees, you'll find one tree with 50, 60 eagles in it. And I mean, Stevie Wonder can make an eagle picture up there. I mean, it is,
Point and shoot takes on a whole new meaning, huh?
yeah. So I would rent a boat, and just because the eagles follow those big boats when they leave, well, they follow the little boats too because they don't know the difference. So they would follow me out there, and eagles fish. They fish about 50% of their lives of fishing. And so I'm out there. I just position, I tell the captain, put the boat on sun angle. I know where the wind is. We're right back to that wind and sun angle story. I knew that the wind was behind me in that case. The eagle was flying down, and eagles can see way better than we can, and they can also see out of both sides of their eyes as well as looking forward. So when they see a fish, they can make a last minute adjustment, and that photograph is the bird coming in and making a last minute adjustment, and they're so adept at using their primary wings that he just touches the water to slow himself down so he can flip around and grab the fish.
Oh, wow.
So that's what's happening.
So you think that that bird was intentionally dipping its wing in?
Oh, I don't think so. I know so.
Wow.
Yeah, because seconds later he had the fish. He was going a different direction.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen this over 30 years going up there. They'll be going one way, and then all of a sudden they twist on a dime and they go another way because they see a fish. And that's their preferred food. Now, they'll eat anything. I've got pictures of eagles carrying jackrabbits.
Mm-hmm.
I've got pictures of eagles carrying otters. They'll eat anything, but they prefer fish. So I just, like a dummy, went up there when it was 17 below and would lay down in the snow, and the eagles weren't afraid of me, and they'd come right up to me. I actually had one steal my hat once. They're apex predators, so that means they're not afraid of anything, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody else was up there. So, however, again, people started finding out where I was going, and a workshop industry followed, and so now there's a bunch of people that go up there every year as well. And if I ever did find another special place like that, I will never tell anybody where it is, not because I'm selfish, but just because I don't, if you go to Bosque del Apache this year, right after Thanksgiving, you'll see 600 photographers lined up in front of the crane pools trying to get a photograph. It's starting to get a little crazy. So sometimes Americans love things to death, but people want to get these photographs because they are impressive. So, but if you want to photograph eagles, go to the Cook Inlet, spend as much time as you can there in the winter, and you will have the time of your life. And by the way, it's also a great place to fish for halibut. So I always hire a local guide to fish for me, and they cook for me as well. There's Russian Orthodox churches in the area, and the priest will usually in the wintertime do work on boats to try to supplant their income. And they cook it all the old Russian way. And so we grab these halibut, and 20 minutes later, we're eating them. And it's not a bad way to live. So I've lived a pretty good life. I'm pretty lucky to have done all these things and seen all these things and have it happen in front of me. So I guess the point I was trying to make earlier, I never take for granted that I'm there because a lot of people don't get to go there.
I did notice when I was online that you have started a new thing with the iPhone photos and that iPhone photo team. Wonderful. So I'm joining and you'll see my stuff eventually. But do you want to tell anybody about the website?
It's iPhonePhotoTeam.com. Well, it just boils down to a couple things. Number one, my health is in decline, and I'm an old man now, and I can't carry the lenses that I used to make cranes in the fire mist around, but I can carry a cell phone, and it's the phone everybody has with them. So I plan to spend my remaining days teaching and writing about my photographic experiences. And I thought one thing I could do is help people make better pictures with their iPhones. So myself and Jefferson Graham, who used to be the technology columnist at USA Today, and my friend Rich Harrington, who is a well-known speaker and teacher on the Apple circuit. Also, I started a website called Photo Focus 28 years ago. He bought it from me. And then Dave Moser, who used to work with our friend Scott Kelby at Kelby One, we got together and built this site, and it's free to join. You know, it's not going to make us millions of dollars. It's just for fun because everybody wants better pictures with their iPhone, and we think we can help them get it. So that's just one of the things I'm doing in my quote unquote retirement.
iPhonePhotoTeam.com. Okay. We'll promote that on my website.
Well, thank you. And we have a Friday, every Friday we have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's free as well. And we have photo contests. It's a lot of fun. People are enjoying it. We have about 700 members. It's not a big community, but it's fun.
But you know, people are going to hear about it. You're gonna get lots more people. Is it okay that I tell people on the show, or would you rather I keep it a secret?
No, we're trying to help. We want to promote it. Anybody that has an iPhone, we want them to enjoy their camera, and we probably know a little bit more about it than they do. So we're going to try to help them if we can.
All right. Well, thank you. My guest has been Scott Bourne, who is retired, unfortunately, but is a fantastic photographer, videographer, and now iPhone guru.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Thanks for being here, Scott. I appreciate it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Scott Bourne. What a wonderful, wonderful storyteller. I wanted to tell you about some of the birds that he mentioned, because he in passing mentioned a number of different birds. And so I'm going to show you a little more about each of those species. First, of course, is the sandhill cranes, which was the focus of the entire interview. And here are silhouetted. This is actually one of Scott's pictures. And he has another. Again, silhouette. Isn't that a beautiful bird? You can't really see too much in a silhouette, though. So let's see if we can see a little more in the next one. Yeah, sandhill cranes are birds that go out in the fields and they eat things like mice and that sort of stuff. They go in the water and they eat things and all that sort of stuff. And sandhill cranes are very interesting. And the next one I want to talk to you about is snow geese. Now, this is a snow goose. There it is flying. You can see the black wingtips as it flies, and there's a close-up of it. So this is what it looks like if they all take off at once. So these are snow geese. Yeah. A lot of birds. Snow geese, you can see flocks of thousands. I mean, 4,000 or 5,000 birds at once is not unusual. So let me tell you a little bit about them. I'm going to read to you the paragraph from eBird. Now, eBird is a place where you can get lots of information and that sort of thing. Here is what it says about snow geese. Medium-sized goose with two strikingly different color morphs. White morph is generally more common. Adults have black wingtips, pink bill, and pink legs, and often show yellowish staining on the head. Juveniles have dark brownish bill and legs and are variable grayish smudging on body and wings. Dark morph adults are dark slaty gray with a white face, and juvenile dark morph are entirely dark. Typically, they are found in flocks, sometimes numbering into the thousands, and individuals may be found with other geese species. Occurs in fields, marshes, and lakes during migration in winter. Breeds in Arctic tundra. Compare this with Ross's goose, which is like a cuter miniature version of a snow goose. Pay attention to the bill. Snow goose has a longer bill with a more curved border where it meets the face and a more pronounced dark grin patch. But beware, Ross's goose can show a small grin patch. So let's see the Ross's goose now. That's on from our Macaulay library. Again, we're getting lots of beautiful pictures. The Ross's goose is a cute miniature version of a snow goose with a smaller body, shorter neck, and stubbier bill. This is one swimming. As you can see, floats in the water. Looks just like a snow goose, doesn't it? Not quite. Pay special attention to the bill. It is short, with a straighter border where it meets the face, a much less obvious dark grin patch, and often bluish gray color at the base. Also known the clean white head. Snow goose typically has a little yellowish staining on its face. Hybrids with snow goose are rare, but regular. Some intermediates might be best left unidentified. Dark morphrosis is extremely rare. Typically, these are found in flocks, but individuals may be found with other geese species, frequently in large mixed flocks with snow geese. Occurs in fields, marshes, and lakes during migration in winter, breeds in Arctic tundra. Let's see another one of those. There it is flying. You can notice it's still got those black wing patches. And the next, and landing, and notice the pink bill and the pink feet. And I think that's the last one of those. Oh no, there it is. There's a comparison, the Ross's goose to a Canada goose. Most people are familiar with Canada goose. I will read you about this kiskadee. It says, this flycatcher is brown above and bright yellow below with a black and white head pattern, very similar in plumage to a host of other species, including the great kiskadee and the rusty-margined flycatcher. However, note the lesser kiskadee's smaller size, slender shape, and longer, narrow bill. The sexes look alike. It's found singly or in pairs, almost exclusively around slow-moving bodies of water in the lowlands of northern South America. Where it is easy to find. It tends to perch conspicuously, often at eye level, close to the water surface. And also, you can listen for its slurred, buzzy calls to help distinguish it from similar species. Now, the picture that we showed when we were doing the interview segment, the earlier segment, showed a picture of a kiskadee. I could not tell from that photo whether this was a greater or a lesser kiskadee. Here are two of them. To me, they look like they might even be young birds. They got that little juvenile look. And then here's one that's just one bird. There, isn't that a beautiful bird? These are both Scott Bourne's pictures. And you see what I mean? You can't tell if that bird is the greater kiskadee or the smaller kiskadee because they're the same size, shape, color, just a slight difference in size. All right, well, let's move on from the kiskadees, and let's go for a green jay. Now, the picture that we showed in the interview was one of Scott's, and it's a green jay landing. Isn't that an amazing picture? The spread wings. Scott is a fantastic photographer. Green jays are an interesting bird, and we have a number of images from the Macaulay Library to show you. Notice on this one and the ones that we're going to show you, the color of the head. It's blue. Stunning and unmistakable green and yellow plumage with a bold black and blue head pattern. Birds from Texas to Honduras have a blue crown and a dark eye and relatively uniform lime green body, and occur in small flocks in woodlands with brushy understory. Birds in South America, sometimes called Inca jays, occur in the Andean cloud forest from Venezuela to Bolivia. Let's see another one. They show a right crown. And so this bird is obviously a North American bird. Notice the smooth head on that. They have the ability to raise a crest. So if they want to, they can perk up a little bit and look like this. All right. So those were the green jays. Now, red-winged blackbird is the next one. And that is a bird that is common bird. And the picture from Scott was the bird was landing at you. It was very dramatic. But most of the time, you're going to see a bird looking like this. And they are sitting on top of cattails, or it might be tule reeds, or someplace like that. But they like reeds and cattails. And this is a male. They come earlier. They come before the females come. They set up, they spread out, and they each make a little spot. And then they display and they sing. They fluff up their little red epaulets and they flare their wings and they sing, "I'm so wonderful." That is a typical behavior for a red-winged blackbird. Let's see the next picture. This is the female. Very brown and hard to see, and that's intentional. When the ladies come, they each pick out, one of the fellows, and then they build a nest hanging from that tule reed, and then they get in there and they do the nest thing. Meanwhile, the boys are up at the top singing, "I'm so great, I'm so wonderful." Do we happen to have Scott Bourne's red-winged blackbird picture? He has a fantastic picture of a bird singing, and it's such a cold morning. You can actually see the warmth of that song. Let me read you. Oh, there it is. There it is. Right there. Yes, isn't that a gorgeous picture? I love that picture. I'm going to read to you from eBird about red-winged blackbirds. It says, males are black with a red shoulder patch that is sometimes concealed. Males have rusty feathers edged in the winter. Females are streaked brown and often confused with sparrows. Look for long, sharply pointed bills to distinguish. Often in flocks, especially in winter, they visit feeders, breed in marshes and scrubby wet fields. The distinctive song, especially as migrants arrive in early spring. So there you go, red-winged blackbird. It's a lovely bird. Next, we have bald eagles. Now, we aren't even going to bother looking at the Macaulay Library for this because Scott Bourne has so many fantastic bald eagle pictures. So here's one flying over the snow. And here's one. What's this one? Ah, yes. Now, you know that bald means white, and so a bald eagle is a white-headed eagle, but they aren't always white-headed. So the young ones don't get their white heads until they get old enough to go courting. It's very common in birds that they morph as juveniles in one pattern or one color, and then when they get to be an adult, then they get the good stuff. What's another one? Okay, so this is the one that you saw in the interview, and this is amazing. When I heard that story, I was shocked. And it's true. The eagles flying along, they see a fish over there someplace. They dip the wing in to slow down that side, and they turn and get that fish. So, yeah, it's like a rudder or something, isn't it? So what's the next one? And here it is, getting a fish. Straight on, there you go. Crap. And all of these are from Scott Bourne. All of these. Beautiful. Now there you can see that's a young one. It hasn't molted into its final coloration. I didn't realize we had so many of these. Here, this is a fun one. He was lying down in the snow, taking a picture, and they're going, "Oh, what's that? Who's that?" I love it. And there, again, in the snow, catching something. And that's the marks left in the snow after it caught something. You can see where the wings dragged across the top of the snow, and you can see where those claws went right underneath. And there he is. When he took that other picture, there he is. I remember in the interview where he said, and they're not afraid of him. They walked right up to him and stole his hat. I don't know if that was his hat that time or not. Oh, they're so beautiful. Is that the last one? Oh, I guess it wasn't the last one. That is an adult bald eagle. By the way, males and females don't look any different when they're adults. Next. And we're back to flying over the snow. Okay, so those are the bald eagles, and all of those pictures were Scott Bourne's. All right. The next species I wanted to talk to you about is, he said he went down to La Jolla. He said La Jolla Cliffs, and there's a place down there in La Jolla that has cliffs. And there he saw the brown pelican. Now, these are all going to be Macaulay Library pictures because we don't have any of Scott's, but that's okay. We've got a bunch of brown pelican pictures. So here's one flying. And that's what a brown pelican looks like when it's flying. And on the next one, this is probably the most important of the pictures that we have here. That's the breeding plumage that Scott said he went down there to photograph, because certain times a year they get this beautiful courting. And I think I have a few more just standing in the water, fluffing around. Here we go. That is brown pelican in breeding plumage. And cute. And there's another one. Isn't it cute? Okay, so I was going to read you something about brown pelicans. Let's see what it says. It says large and conspicuous gray-brown bird of saltwater habitats, strictly coastal, rarely seen on inland lakes. A very long bill with a pouch for scooping up fish. Forages mainly by diving on fish from above, frequently cues into fishing activity, looking for handouts, often flies in long lines close to the water's surface. All right. Now, the other bird that he said he went down there to look for is the Brandt's cormorant. Now, here in Davis, we have the double-crested cormorant. This is a Brandt's. Now, look at this. It's swimming. There it is. It's just a normal cormorant. And here it is flying. And you can see it still has that cormorant shape. They hold themselves in such a way that the neck has a little bit of a kink, a bend, or something in it. It goes, it just not quite straight there. Next one. In breeding season, this bird gets bright turquoise underneath the chin. While you look at the next picture, I'm going to read. It says black overall with greenish iridescence on the back, pale buffy feathers at the base of the bill. Breeding adults have blue skin on the throat. Immatures have a buffy breast. Strictly coastal. Dives to capture fish. Thicker bill and neck than similar pelagic cormorant. You got something here that's bright turquoise. Well, if you're just sitting here like this, nobody can see it. So you're going to have to do something to show that off. And this is the position that they get. So they hunker down, they got the wings, they got the tail up, they got the head back, they're showing off their thing. And I think there's two of those. Both of those pictures were taken at the La Jolla place. There's another one. All right. So that's everything he mentioned except for one. And that one is a little bird called a sanderling. A sanderling, small, sprightly shorebird. Breeding plumage shows rusty tones on the upper part, often with a frosty appearance when fresh. By midsummer, the frosty feather tips fade away and the neck can be a deep, rich red. Well, not really, really red. But in the winter, it's very pale. All seasons, note the larger size and somewhat thicker bill than other peeps. Peeps are little shorebirds, and along with a white stripe ring. Okay, so here it is, running along the sand. That's what sanderlings do. They just scurry along. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I really enjoyed talking to Scott Bourne. He's so gracious, so generous, such a nice person, and has a good story too. All right. Well, that's it for right now. I hope you enjoy this show, Birding with Lois. And I want to thank our sponsors, the DVE Store and Office Hours 090, for helping make this possible. If you need to contact us, head for that website, birdingwithlois.global.